at these events need to come together and say, we're doing this event, but Pence, Vice President Pence, you've been exposed to people who test positive, so you're going to be in a different room, or both of you are going to be in different rooms and we're going to do it remotely? Isn't that the safest thing? Why is this even worth the risk?
Well, I think what would be great is if today and every day we were hearing from our public health leaders about why things were being done in different situations. And that would help reassure Americans where decisions were being made for public health reasons and where things were being done for political reasons. Without that, there's always going to be that feeling that you can't tell the difference. And when public health then says something, some people are going to buy it and other people won't.
A respected epidemiologist who also once served as CDC director reportedly encouraged the current CDC director, Robert Redfield, to call out the president and his pressuring of the CDC. In a private letter to Redfield obtained by USA Today, Dr. William Fagey writes, quote, "The White House has had no hesitation to blame and disgrace CDC," unquote. He goes on to write, quote, "When they, those in the White House, go on to fire you, this will be a multi-week story and you can hold your head high," unquote. This letter was after Dr. Scott Atlas was appointed to the coronavirus task force. Atlas doesn't have a background in infectious diseases. Fagey making the case that Redfield could better expose the White House's flaws and faults and problems here by coordinating his own firing rather than just resigning. You're a former acting CDC director. What did you make of this all?
Well, Dr. Fagey is one of my heroes. He is responsible in large part for the eradication of smallpox around the world. And he is someone that we all look up to in public health. And I know that was meant as a private letter to Dr. Redfield. And what he was doing was calling on the CDC director to ensure he was doing everything he could to defend the agency and the scientists. He expressed deep concern over the loss of trust that's taken place because CDC has not been allowed to lead. And he called on Dr. Redfield to call that out, to call out where there's been political interference, and then let the cards fall where they may in terms of whether he got fired or not. And, we'll see over time what Dr. Redfield decides to do. But it's absolutely essential that we do everything we can to regain the trust in one of the world's best public health agencies, and a trust that now is really in tatters.
Yeah. Dr. Richard Besser, as always, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. More on our breaking news. What message is President Trump sending by violating his administration's own guidelines about coronavirus? Stay with us.
You can't get millions of Americans, including 3 ex-presidents, to agree on much these days. There is at least one thing they all have in common, though. They use Boll and Branch sheets. These sheets are made from pure organic cotton, sourced from the world's best family-owned mills. The cotton they use isn't just grown. It's rain-fed and never touched by pesticides. Oh, and they're soft. Really, really soft. Boll and Branch sheets feel like they should cost $1,000, but they don't. You can get a sheet set starting at just $160. Trying them out is an easy thing to do because Boll and Branch believes in their work, and they want you to as well. It's why they're offering a month of comfort at no risk to you. If you don't love your sheets, just send them back for a full refund. Right now, you can get $50 off any sheet set when you visit bollandbranch.com and use the promo code FACTS. That's Boll and, spelled BOLLAND, branch.com. And the promo code is FACTS. Restrictions may apply. See website for details.
Just minutes ago, President Trump returned to the Oval Office despite still being infected with coronavirus. And a source tells CNN that both Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and social media advisor Dan Scavino were in the Oval Office with the president. They were wearing protective gear, we're told. Joining us now, the New York Times' Peter Baker and the New Yorker's Susan Glasser. They've covered the White House for decades. They're out with a brand new book called The Man Who Ran Washington, The Life and Times of James A. Baker III. It's getting incredible reviews. Peter, I want to get to your book in a sec, but I have to ask, you've been covering the White House for decades now. For the second day in a row, President Trump's doctor issued a written statement, hasn't taken questions, is not providing the information that we're used to getting when a president has a health issue. Based on your reporting, how much can the American people trust what the White House is saying about President Trump's current condition?
Well, I think the White House has made very clear that it's not giving a full picture of the president's health. It doesn't intend to. We've asked questions repeatedly about when his last negative test was, what these scans show of his lungs. all sorts of questions that they've either decided not to answer or given partial information for. Even the president's doctor, who was a doctor and not a political aide, the other day admitted that he basically gave a rosy presentation because he knew the president was watching on television and wanted to make him feel good. So you can't really assume that we're getting the full picture at this point.
I just want to make sure our viewers understand that the reason you two aren't social distancing is that you're married. Just people might not know. People might not know that. Okay. Anyway, Susan, it's not just affecting the White House. Of course, it's spreading throughout. Nearly the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff are in quarantine after possible exposure. But the president seems to want to act as though nothing's wrong. There's a photo of a bunch of White House aides not wearing masks today. Are they in denial? Are they just lying about how bad things are so as to present a false picture? What's going on here exactly?
Well, Jake, I think it's all of the above, right? You have a situation where so close to the election, President Trump has spent months in one form or another of coronavirus denialism. And I think, actually even contracting the disease, he's unwilling to change that position now. It seems to me that what's interesting about this is that he's forced so many other people to go along with, violating basic common sense and public health things. The question is really, is there any point at which this White House staff is going to say enough is enough? You're putting our lives at risk. You're putting us in danger. Lots of off the record or on background grumbling. But so far, essentially, they've been given no choice by the president but to publicly go along with this.
So, Peter, you two wrote this new book about the ultimate Washington insider, James Baker. He worked for 3 presidents. He's a former White House chief of staff, Treasury Secretary, Secretary of State. You write about how his being an old-school Republican, he struggled to vote for President Trump. But he did vote for President Trump. You write, quote, what he had learned in a lifetime of wielding power was that on the outside you had none. Becoming a never-Trumper would have meant giving up whatever modest influence he had left. Whether he actually needed it anymore was not the point. Now, I know you two did an event just today with Secretary Baker, and he didn't say who he was going to vote for, but he did say he believes in conservative principles and the Democratic platform terrifies him. So what does that mean?
Yeah, he was pretty tough, I think, in his assessment of where things are today. He talked about how our alliances overseas are so frayed, they're broken, how the next president has to do something to repair them. He talked about the fiscal debt bomb that is about to go off. He said last week's debate was a disaster, and yet he has not yet broken with President Trump. He says, look, I'm a conservative, and I believe in these principles, and he's stuck with his party so far. I think it's been a striking answer on his part, because I think it talks about the modern Republican Party. It's sort of a parable for where they are. They may not like what President Trump is doing. They may not like the kind of person he is, but they have more or less stuck with him. And I think that that tells you why he's done as well as he has done with Republicans in the polls in about a month out from the election.
I guess that's true, but Susan, he was best friends with George H.W. Bush, right? He wasn't even involved in politics before. And the Bushes are no fans of the Trumps, and the feeling is the same on President Trump's end.
Well, that's exactly right. It's very interesting, Jake, because he had, of everyone, you would think Jim Baker would have an easy pass, essentially, and should just say, well, my loyalties are to the Bush family, or I'm just going to sit this out. But I think it does tell you why more than 40% of the American people still telling pollsters that they are going to vote for Donald Trump, right? It's really illustrative of why the hostile takeover of the Republican Party has worked. And again, as a subject for our biography, we kept asking him these questions over and over and over again. And I think it was interesting for people watching this event to experience what we experienced, which was a surprise that someone who really is the un-Trump in so many ways and came from an era when politics worked differently would go along with a man he finds so distasteful.
Susan Glasser, Peter Baker, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations. The reviews are incredible. The new book, again, The Man Who Ran Washington, The Life and Times of James A. Baker III. Thanks to both of you. How one airport is doing what a lot of schools and offices across the country have not been able to do yet to slow the spread of coronavirus. Stay with us. The money lead now. Trump's latest tweets calling off stimulus talks, followed by mixed messages, are sending the already bruised and battered airline industry into a tailspin. CNN's Pete Montine has more now on how airline workers say they're suffering because of Congress and the president's lack of action.
As all of you know, the airline industry has been impacted greatly by this global pandemic.
When flight attendant Brianna Ross addressed the passengers of her American Airlines flight, she didn't expect to leave them with a tearful goodbye.
For myself and one other crew member on our flight today, this means we'll be furloughed October 1st. And unfortunately, this was my last working flight before that day comes.
Airlines say they will recall Ross and the roughly 50,000 workers they cut last week, but only if they get $25 billion in a new stimulus bill. New tweets from President Trump have thrown a deal into disarray. It's the latest breakdown in talks with House Democrats that airlines call disheartening.
People see numbers on TV, but we are real people that are really struggling right now.
Ross says she's living on savings from her last few months on the job. Just furloughed workers say new federal help is their best hope. 8,000 flight attendants at American Airlines alone are now looking for jobs.
It's been a roller coaster. We've been high, we've been low, we've been on this verge of making this happen for so long, and then for it to all just fall apart.
In a new letter, airline unions are urging Congress to pass a standalone stimulus for airlines. President Trump tweeted his support, but House leaders stressed the bill failed in the Senate. Airline unions say lawmakers must end this stimulus standoff, with workers caught in the middle.
These are people who have been on the front lines since the beginning of this virus. Fighting is cruel and it's got to be reversed. Save our jobs.
There could be more furloughs if Congress does not act. Delta says it will furlough 1,700 pilots starting November 1st. Southwest says its employees could face pay cuts without federal help. And you can see why airlines need it, Jake. 5 p.m. at Reagan National Airport. This place is practically a ghost town.
Yeah, nobody's flying because it's not safe, because the government has failed to protect the population. Pete Montine, thanks so much. There are more people traveling by plane since the early days of the pandemic, and the TSA has changed protocols to try to boost passenger confidence. One airport in Florida is going even farther. They're planning to offer COVID tests to all passengers who pass through. CNN's Randy Kay takes a look now inside this first-in-the-nation testing program.
I'm going to make you tear up, but I'm not going to make you cry, okay?
This may look like a doctor's office.
Great. Go to your happy place and count to 5, okay? And don't pull back from me. Awesome job. Thank you so much.
But it's Tampa International Airport, one of the first airports in the country to offer COVID tests to departing and arriving passengers. Passenger Jevelyn McCaskill was flying to Massachusetts and didn't want to quarantine for 14 days as the state requires unless you've been tested.
I'm going to Massachusetts, and because of the restrictions there, I figured let me get it in Tampa. And then I heard about this literally 24 hours ago, that this pilot was launching. I'm like, oh my God.
All passengers can be tested if they're traveling or have traveled within 72 hours. There's a fee for the test, too. $57 for the rapid antigen test or $125 for the PCR test, which may take a couple of days for results but is considered the gold standard. Baycare Health System has partnered with Tampa's airport.
We believe that in order to get through this pandemic, we have to have widespread testing. We have to be able to test and allow people to have access.
People like Victoria and Louis Kikis, who are heading to New York City.
For me, it's the cost is irrelevant. It's just a matter of doing the right thing.
We're meeting family and friends, and I just want to make sure we're not doing anything that will harm anybody else.
The couple chose the rapid test.
If it was positive, there would be a plus.
And after 15 minutes passed, they learned they tested negative. Tampa International CEO hopes these tests will bring more travelers back to the airport and the skies.
Yeah, it's for all passengers, no matter what airline they're on, no matter what destination they're going to, and we think it's a real boost to the confidence of the travelers.
A confidence boost is just what this woman needed. She's on her way to Virginia to see her 75-year-old mom.
I just want to make sure that I don't have COVID. I don't want to expose her, so this is a perfect way to make sure that I'm being safe and keeping her safe as well.
Her rapid test came back negative, too.
Cases is not the best method.
Statewide, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' office tells CNN anyone can get a COVID test if they want one. Currently, Florida is averaging about 25,000 tests per day, half of what it was doing during the summer surge. but that could soon change.
I think it's going to really contribute to our efforts.